Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Untold Ireland. Now, joining us today for episode 2 of season 2 is the legendary Roy Galvin. Roy Galvin is a world-renowned professional ballet dancer, a native Irish speaker. He went to a Gael school when he was younger, and he's also a fantastic musician and all around pretty cool guy, super interesting. So without further ado, guys, let's crack on with the interview.
How are you doing today, Roy? Thank you very much for joining us. Would you just like to tell us when and where you were born?
Oh, that's very easy. I was born in Limerick City, in the centre of Limerick City. It's amazing when I ask people, where is the centre of Limerick City? It's amazing the amount of people who don't actually know where the centre is. But if we're talking about Brownthons and Devons, that's the centre of Limerick, and that's where I was born and raised.
And when would you have moved to Tipperary? Would you have grown up in Tip your entire life? I mean Limerick?
I moved to Tipperary quite early in my life. I've been living here now for only 47 years, so it's, But I am a Limerick man living in County Tipperary. You have to be very careful, especially on sports days. Mm-hmm. You know, depending who's playing and that, so, because I'm literally on the border of Limerick and Tipperary.
Would Tip and Limerick have a similar thing going on to Cork and Kerry, where it's just big rivalry like?
Oh, you bet. Now, what's interesting is the village of Galway, 2 kilometres down the road, is in County Limerick. But where we are here right now is Galway, County Tipperary, and I always refer to myself as the ugly baby. They don't want to talk about it down the village. Mm-hmm. They get quite uneasy if you say that. Mm-hmm. But I always proclaim that I live in Galway, County Tipperary. And of course, we're on the edge of the Glen of Aherlow, beautiful Glen of Aherlow in southwest Tipperary.
And what was it like growing up in Ireland? And especially as well growing up as a gay man in Ireland?
Well, I grew up, I was born in the 50s, and I suppose I would have been, in my teens in the very early 70s. And it was very challenging. It was challenging in the sense that according to the World Health Organization, I had a mental health problem. Mm-hmm. According to the laws of the land, I was a criminal. And according to the Roman Catholic Church, they described homosexuality as intrinsic evil. Mm-hmm. So with those 3 mainstays of power, I'm as amazed as you are that I survived it. Mm-hmm. And I understand why the suicide rate is so much higher amongst the LGBTQI community.
Yeah, especially as well because people are born gay, like no one asks to be gay. So when you get persecuted for something that's always been there your entire life, that would affect you deeply. Like
against you.
Yeah.
I wanted to be open about it from a very early age, and I remember my mother sort of cautioning me, maybe you should wait and that, but I didn't see any value in presenting myself other than my authentic self.
Yeah. And on the topic of your mother there, what was it like coming out to your mum?
Oh, I came out to my mother when I think I was about 19. I came home one night late and she was on the phone and she was very upset and animated on the phone. And as I came in, she said, "Oh, it's okay, he's here," and finished up the conversation. I later found out, at this stage we had moved to Dublin, and I found out that she was on the phone to Pearse Street Garda station reporting me as missing.
Oh.
So I had to kind of sit her down and have the conversation, mm-hmm. which kind of went, I always refer to her as mother when I want her to listen to me. When I wanted something from her, it was more ma, mm-hmm. and that was usually when I wanted money.
Yeah.
when I was short of money. But if I wanted her to listen, I used to say mother. So I remember addressing her as mother. I said, not only am I going to be coming home late occasionally, there will be times when I won't actually come home. And she said, well, once I know you're safe,
Yeah.
you know. And I think it was at that stage I got the courage to say to her, and by the way, I'm gay. And her response to that was, yeah, I know that. And I went, oh, when did you know? And she said, when you were 3. I went, that's very interesting. How come you noticed I was gay when I was 3? She said, well, you're the youngest of 8. I've had the experience with the other 7. I saw the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was very interesting. And of course I said, well, thanks for the help when I needed it. You know, and she said what all parents say is, I had to wait until you were ready.
Yeah.
You know, but really I could have done with help sooner than that.
Mm-hmm. Being a gay man in Ireland, you set up the GAA.
I did.
In 1993?
What happened there was, as an Irish language speaker, I found that my life was very, things were very separate.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was a musician, which was very separate to being a classical ballet dancer, which was very separate to being an Irish language speaker.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at that point I was trying to pull things together. And so I started this group called Gaelgori Éireacha Aontaithe, United Gay Irish Speakers.
Yeah.
And what I found actually when I started, I was just looking to be able to go out, have fun, but not speak English.
Mm-hmm.
Just remain speaking in Irish. And what I found at the time, I got a lot of communication from gay men in Gaeltacht areas. There seemed to almost be a higher percentage of gay men who were native Irish speakers, which I found absolutely bewildering. And then I thought about it and I thought, my gosh, it must be very awkward for them to try and express themselves, but to use another language, to change to English.
Yeah.
What's this all about? Surely we can communicate and be ourselves. And that's how it came about. And in doing that, I didn't realise, but I actually gave the Irish language the word for gay, éireach. And I started to hear it being used and referenced on radio programmes, on the 6 o'clock news, on the television, and in various different publications.
That's amazing.
I never thought in my entire life that I would give a word to the Irish language. Now, I do remember doing an interview on the Irish language radio station, Radio in the Gaeltacht, and the presenter was in a community hall somewhere in Connemara, and he was going around asking people what did they think of the word éireach for gay, and an awful lot of them were not happy, not one bit happy. To which I responded, well, who wants to be part of a language that doesn't even have a word to describe you?
Yeah.
You know, you have lots of insults in the Irish language to describe us, but nothing positive. So, do I really want to be part of this language? So it was very interesting. But gay became the recognised word.
That is amazing. I'm blown away by that.
I still can't believe that. You know, today, however, it is altering because young people, LGBTQI people, no longer really identify with the word gay. They identify with the word queer.
Yeah, because queer is more of a spectrum then, that it's you're either...
Well, I'm not so sure about that aspect. To me, queer is a word I would never use. It was used, you know, it hurt me too much growing up.
Yeah, it's used as a derogatory term.
As a very derogatory, nasty way of addressing me. But young people like it, so now they're using the word atach for queer. And that, but éireach. You see, I'm much nearer the time when the Stonewall riots happened in America. giving strength and the beginning to the gay rights movement. And I totally understand people of your age group, people who are, just coming into their adulthood, identifying more with the word queer. And I'm perfectly fine with that, but it does not describe me.
Yeah.
So for that reason, I insist on having the word gay included, included.
It is definitely a good thing at the same time, though, because reclamation of any word that would be used in a derogatory sense to be changed to a positive. Yeah. That's always a good thing. Like.
And there's a new group now using the Irish language, and they use both Éireach and Atach in the title. And I think that's very nice.
On the topic of the Irish language there as well, Roy, can you tell us a bit about your love for the Irish language and what it was like going to a Gael school as well?
Yeah, I was very fortunate that as a child, the nearest school to me in Limerick City was on Voskull, the model school, and that was a Gael school at a time when I think there was only 11 Gael schools in the entire country. And my mother was born and raised in England, and when she came home to Ireland, I think she really wanted all of us to connect. And of course the language is one great way and that. But I had an excellent experience in primary school, and I attribute everything that I do today to my schooling in the primary school. And I remember learning English through Irish in the Gael school, which was an interesting concept. And so I've kept it with me all the time. And I have to be very honest and say that if I'm speaking English day after day after day, I begin to go crazy. There's something in me that I have to return to speaking Irish. It's like going back to the well. I've got to go back and that. So I attend a lot of Irish language festivals that are primarily located in the Gaeltacht areas, and I go back and I speak Irish with all the people, and then I feel filled up.
Yeah.
And I feel I can now face the next couple of months, but every so often I feel really depleted and that. Although I have to say here, I speak a lot of Irish here because a lot of people know me as being an Irish language speaker, so if I go into Tipperary town, people will come up and speak Irish to me, or if I go down to Mitchellstown, which is also nearby, people will speak to me in Irish. So I get the opportunity quite often to speak in Irish. I also, by the way, people are also interested in the fact that I speak Irish, but I also speak Russian and I also speak Spanish. But it's only when I speak Irish it's common to song.
Wow.
Strangely enough.
May I ask how you learned Russian and Spanish?
Oh, that's very simple. I was a ballet dancer up to the age of 40. First male ballet dancer in Ireland. And when the Russian company, the Bolshoi Ballet from Moscow, first came to Ireland in 1986, a magazine asked me would I go along and would I do a review, which I did. But the next day I was up in Dublin walking past the Shelburne Hotel, and lo and behold, the two principal dancers from the previous night came out the door, and they were a husband and wife team. And I couldn't believe my eyes. I went straight up, out with the hand, shook hands, told them I thought they were fabulous, brilliant, all that. And they looked at one another, and they looked back at me, and they said, "Что?" And I went, oh my God, these people haven't a word of English. How presumptuous of me.
Should have tried the Irish.
How presumptuous of me. So I thought, surely I can learn how to say hello and welcome in Russian. And it just so happened that at that very same time, I was rehearsing for a television show where I was dancing. I hated the choreography. I hated the choreographer, I hated the costumes, and I pretty much hated the music and everything to do with it.
Yeah.
So every day at 6 o'clock when we were finished, I took myself down to the ILAC Centre in Dublin, to the library, and I got the linguaphone, where you listen to the language with the book and follow the book. And I did that for a year every day on my own. And then started attending Russian classes. And when I went to my first Russian class, I was a little bit late because of the traffic in the centre of Dublin. And the class had just started. And I went in and I was very apologetic. And I asked the teacher, is it okay for me to come in? And she looked at me and she said, what part of Germany are you from? And I thought, oh God, she doesn't understand me. I said, I'm sorry, I'm late, can I come in? What she was actually referring to was that because I had learned it from the linguaphone, I had picked up a good accent, and she thought I was from Germany.
Well.
Not, she didn't say what part of Tipperary are you from, and that. And most Russians think that I'm from either Latvia or Lithuania when I speak Russian, which is very complimentary, very flattering. They don't say what part of Ireland are you from. So that was very interesting, and so I started studying then with an actual teacher, because the problem with using recordings is you can't ask questions. You need a teacher to ask questions.
On the topic of being a professional ballet dancer as well, how did you get a start as a professional ballet dancer?
Well, I was working as a professional musician. I was performing 6 nights a week up in Dublin in a place called Jury's Irish Cabaret. Jury's Irish Cabaret was the place to go. It was any visiting dignitary to the city ended up at Jury's Cabaret. And I was performing in that for 3 years. And every so often the stage manager would come backstage with free tickets for the various different theatres in Dublin for opening nights. Because the one thing you can't have on an opening night are empty seats.
Yeah.
Or the critics are going to say, it was a great show, but it wasn't that full. So we would be asked to fill up the spare seats. And I went to the Abbey Theatre and I saw the Irish Ballet Company live. And when it was finished, I can't remember who was with me. Was it my mother? Was it a friend? I turned to whoever it was and I said, I am going to do that for the rest of my life.
And what age would you have been then?
I was 19.
Wow.
Very late but I had been doing Irish dancing, and the other thing was I was so skinny that all I had to do was put the imprint of a ballet dancer onto my own body.
Yeah.
Quite often you would find in ballet, especially with men, they'll come and they'll have a background in sports. They might have played rugby or football or something. They have the added task of having to get rid of that shape and then to develop a ballet dancer's shape, because a lot of the training in classical ballet, the 1.5-hour ballet class we do every morning before we start rehearsals, that is about shaping the body. As opposed to contemporary dance. Contemporary dance uses the body you have. You don't have to change it. But with classical ballet, all female dancers pretty much look the same, and all male dancers pretty much look the same. That's because of the training. And that. So even though I started late, I hadn't been doing a sport, so I didn't have any shape on my body. I was just thin.
On the topic of physiques during ballet, you hear a lot of stories kind of about people maybe going about it the wrong way, trying to get the physique. Essentially what I'm asking is there a big body dysmorphia problem in the ballet scene?
Well, for females there is. Yeah, for females. They seem to, whatever they have naturally, hips and breasts, are the very things you don't need in classical ballet.
Yeah.
So I would always feel very much sympathy towards female dancers, not so much with male dancers, although I'm sure it's there, but not so much.
Yeah, not to the same extent.
Not to the same extent. Females would up till now would have had a very tough time trying to conform to a very specific look. And it was the director of New York City Ballet, George Balanchine, who brought in that look in the 60s. He used to say to the girls that, to the women in the company, I don't want you to eat less, I don't want you to eat at all.
That's kind of disgusting.
Really, really bad.
Yeah.
And the same man used to travel once a year to Switzerland to get an injection of sheep serum, because apparently that lengthens your life.
Sorry, what is sheep serum?
A sheep serum is injected for longevity. Wow. But unfortunately, the dancers started to notice that he was losing his balance, falling off the chair and things like that. He ended up contracting the disease that goes with that. And he died younger than he should have. That's what happens to people who have too much money.
Yeah.
If you didn't have money, you wouldn't be going to Switzerland for sheep serum. Jacob's Creutzfeldt's disease is what he died of. Wow. But brought in that whole era of excessively thin, anorexic looking, you know. But then in modelling you had people like Twiggy, who was also, you know, of the same genre.
And that look is still very popular.
Across the arts.
Yeah, that look is still very popular in modelling as well. Like if you
very well, not so much now.
Yeah, not so much anymore because
no, they
being
won't
plus
hire
size
them
and all
now
that stuff.
If they look anorexic, they won't take them anymore.
Yeah.
Which is good.
There is a couple of niche people that still do things like
that. And when you
that.
think of the origins of classical ballet back in the late 1800s, women were substantial. Now, needless to say, they weren't lifted. You know, there was none of that happening. But the origins of ballet is women who were very curvy and very shapely. Yeah.
What would be your fondest memory of your ballet career?
I suppose being part of a ballet troupe. Being surrounded by people who did the same thing as you and understood you. Because when you're a ballet dancer outside of ballet, nobody understands. They don't understand. And only another ballet dancer or professional dancer understands the tiredness that goes with it, you know. And sometimes I question myself, you know, my parents split, they separated when I was very young, and I was wondering, was I looking for work that was so exhausting that even when I was finished, I was too tired to think.
Yeah.
And that might have been something to do with it. And maybe I wanted something so utterly beautiful that I chose ballet. Perhaps. These are questions I now ask myself.
Yeah.
Whereas at the time I was just, you know, I'm going to be a ballet dancer. And I remember I did an audition for an Arts Council bursary, which I subsequently won. But I remember being interviewed as part of the process. And the director of Irish Ballet Company was one of the panellists, Jo Denise Moriarty, who's responsible for, credited for bringing ballet to Ireland. And I remember saying to her, should you decide not to give me this bursary, I am still going to be a professional ballet dancer. And I guess she was delighted to hear that. Now, I think that was absolutely outrageous to say something like that.
Yeah.
You know, typical of a young person with confidence. But if I was hiring a dancer, I think I would like to hear them say that.
It is hard to be the greatest at anything without a bit of an ego. Like, you kind of have to think that you are the bee's knees.
Yeah, especially with dancing. You're knocked down too often in dancing, so you have to have an ego. And for a while then, towards the end of my dancing career, I worked as a ballet master. I was the first ballet master for the first 3 years of the company Irish Modern Dance Theatre, which was run by John Scott. And I was the ballet master for 3 years, and I think I hated it because I was working with a bunch of egotistical young dancers, which is exactly what I was myself. But this time I was getting all the flack.
And the thing is as well then, when you have too much ego in one room, they tend to clash very often.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And but when I became ballet master, I found that incredibly lonely because I had crossed the Rubicon from being a dancer to being management. And I remember one of our first tours, we were over in Galway. We had just finished doing a rehearsal in the place we were performing that evening, and one of the dancers said to the others, let's go for coffee. And I thought, oh great. And then I realised that didn't include me.
Oh.
They all went off for coffee, and I was left walking on the street on my own, finding my own coffee shop to go into, to have a coffee by myself on my own. And I went, I don't like this job.
Yeah, that's awful.
Because I was so used to being one of the gang.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. But if you talk about special moments, I suppose the special moment for me was when I made my debut after training. I was an apprentice with the company, and then I got my first year professional contract. Mm-hmm. And I made my debut at the Abbey Theatre, where I had first seen dance. And the company had taken a huge risk, because there were many other men in the company with far greater experience than me, but they gave me the chance. And it was a beautiful piece called Adagietto to Mahler's music, and it only required 3 dancers, 2 boys and a girl. And I was given that, and I to this day I can still see it as I danced it, how nervous I was.
I'd say it was probably an amazing experience, absolutely life-changing.
When you're nervous, it's hard enough to dance. I would say it's hard enough to stand with 2 feet on the ground, but think of having one leg on the ground, the other raised in the air, and still hold your nerve.
And spinning.
And the weirdest thing happened, the opening of the ballet. We'd been doing lots of touring and everything, and the big stage curtains, they usually open out. But not at the Abbey Theatre.
Yeah.
They open up.
Mm-hmm.
So I was on my back with my legs in the air, and on my legs was a female dancer, huddled up. And I was trying not to sway and that. But the next thing is I saw the curtains going away from me as opposed to out, and I never expected it. And that had the effect of me wanting to wobble. Mm-hmm. And I thought after that, nothing was going to faze me.
Yeah.
And that was my opening, my debut with the company.
That's amazing.
And I thought, I'm going to drop the dancer. She's going to fall if I don't hold it together. Mm. Yeah, so that's a very precious memory I have.
You didn't end up dropping her in the end, no?
I didn't. No, but what's interesting about dance is this. Sometimes you come off stage and audience members will come up and absolutely love what you've done, and you might have come off stage thinking that was a terrible performance. I didn't get there, I didn't reach where I wanted to, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Sometimes you come off thinking that was a brilliant performance, and the others go, no, I didn't particularly like that piece, and you're left bewildered. So what I say is a dancer's experience will be very different to an audience member's experience.
Yeah. You mentioned there that the company you were an apprentice with took a big financial risk on you. I was kind of curious, what's the financial side of ballet look like?
Okay, what is very interesting is over the last, say, 30, 40 years, all professional dancers in Ireland have had short-term contracts. Mm-hmm. Companies will get funding from the Arts Council. They go shopping for their dancers, and they will choose various dancers. They'll have a rehearsal period and then a performance period, and then it's over. Mm-hmm. Bye-bye to the dancers. When I was dancing with Irish Ballet Company, I was particularly lucky because we actually had 12-month contracts. So only once a year we signed a contract. Mm-hmm. As soon as you signed a contract, you didn't have to bother. You didn't have to worry about the future.
Yeah.
You had it. Whereas with today, dancers, while they're dancing, they're trying to make the next booking. They're trying to get in the next gig. So it's a very different thing.
I imagine that would be incredibly stressful as well, wouldn't
Very
it?
stressful.
Yeah.
But today, dancers have to learn how to have a social media profile,
That's the big thing, yeah.
how to manage themselves, how to present themselves, how to sell themselves. So in other words, they're taking on a lot of what management would traditionally do. Whereas when I danced, I had none of that. We could completely indulge ourselves in the world of dance. Our responsibilities were to improve our technique as dancers. That was it. Everything else was looked after by the company. So big difference in the demands of a young dancer today. So while you would never be rich financially as a dancer, you will be absolutely enriched from the life and the experience.
Yeah,
of
sometimes
being a
it's
dancer.
not all
But
about
it
the money,
wasn't
like.
financial, you know. And yet I have ended up being financially incredibly secure, and I don't know what has happened. Maybe somebody has been looking down upon me and looking after me, and that I expected to end up as an old man in a one-room bedsit in a grotty part of town, you know.
I think it's kind of karma, to be honest, because even in the time that we've been talking during this interview, we went over the fact what it was like growing up as a gay man in Ireland, the fact that you made your own word for the Irish language,
Yes.
which is amazing, and your start in ballet as well, and how difficult it was to get into everything, and then taking a chance on the apprenticeship. Like, it's well deserved, you know. And even moving on from that to what I was going to ask you about in a minute, all the instruments you play and
Yes.
other things like that, what it was like being a musician.
But can I say, I think now I feel for my poor mother when I told her I was going to be a dancer, because I had started my career as a musician, and musicians get paid 10 times more than dancers, and I had a secure salary and secure work. I'd worked for the rest of my life as a professional musician, and I gave all of that up to become a penniless, at the time, dancer, especially as an apprentice. She must have just learned to bottle it
Yeah.
and say nothing, or else she went out around the corner of the building and just cursed her head off.
Which was more
You
difficult
know,
to learn?
I don't know how she dealt with it, because that was some blow. Because she had just managed to get her son into regular, well-paid employment. And here he is, throwing it all up
Yeah.
for a life that is known for not being financially secure.
I'd say every Irish mammy in the country is rolling their eyes like, oh yeah,
Oh,
my young fella did that as well.
Yeah, to dance, you know, can you imagine? Yeah, but she was very good about it, I have to say, hats off to her. She didn't complain.
Which one of them was more difficult to learn? The music or the dance?
Oh, can I first off say that I'm absolutely envious of people who are singularly talented, who have just one talent and they pursue that all the time, because they become absolute experts. When you move from one form to another, it's at a price. You can't be the top of all of them. When I finished my Leaving Cert, I went down to Cork and I went into the Crawford School of Art, and I studied art for 1 year, and then I moved to Dublin and I got work as a commercial artist in an advertising agency, designing ads for newspapers and television. And I did that for about 1.5 years, and I realised this is possibly not an area I want to stay in, and that. So I seem to have a relative ease with music, dancing, art, those were the areas that I had a very natural affinity with.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've lost your question. Sorry.
I've lost mine as well.
So I moved from art form to art form with great ease, but I suppose chose the one that was financially the most difficult, most challenging.
Yeah.
A good way to describe yourself so would be a jack of all trades.
Jack of all trades and master of none.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because those who are singularly talented, they have nothing to distract them. Nothing pulls them away.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I can be dancing and I go, oh, I need to do some music. And I did at one stage when I was with the National Ballet Company, I asked them for 3 months off because a music company got in touch with me and they asked me would I tour America with them. And I took time off to do that. So, you know, I was being pulled from one to the other.
What was that like then as well, touring around in America?
Touring, I did 2 coast-to-coast tours of America, 27,000 miles by bus, 500 miles a day in a performance every night.
Jesus.
So it was a question of bus, hotel, theatre. Next day, bus, hotel, theatre for 3 months on the road.
Did you enjoy
Starting in New York, performing at Carnegie Hall, and moving all the way down the East Coast, across over into Texas, up the West Coast, California, up to Vancouver, back down through Idaho, Dakota, all the Midwest, I suppose they call it, back into Chicago, back over to New York and home. And I did that twice. You would wake up in the middle of the night, not knowing where you were, in an absolute panic.
Mm-hmm.
Where am I? And you would search for your schedule. You know, it would be on paper in those days, it wouldn't be digital. And you'd look it up and you go, okay, I'm in Idaho. Okay, and you try to go back to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
But you wouldn't know where you were.
Which...
And it was very monotonous. And I discovered and developed a new technique, how to get up and get on the bus but remain asleep. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the way you do that is you pack everything before you go to bed. You just leave out the outfit you're going to wear. And you get up in the morning and you do not have breakfast because breakfast wakes you up. You just put on what you have. If you can get the case down to the reception the night before, all in good. But if not, just drag the case down, put it on the bus, get into the bus seat and just go back to sleep. And then maybe an hour or two later you'd wake up. We always had to sit in the same seat on the bus because whoever was next to us, if they were missing, you knew that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because it was very important that we didn't delay. You know, we had to do about maybe between 6 to 8 hours travelling along the highway.
Yeah.
And that, so you always check that your person was next to you. Now, once the bus was moving, you could go off and, you know, there was also a poker game on down at the back of the bus and, you know, stuff going on. And if your partner moved out, it was great because then you got the whole seat to lie out and sleep properly or as best you could, sort of thing. But I really, really understand musicians when they're tired of touring. And well, I have many friends who are professional musicians and they're always on the road and I know exactly where they're at. Mm-hmm. I don't even have to ask them, I know exactly where they're at. And one of the reasons why I built Tigroy was I got to the point where I was so sick and tired of touring, I decided, well, if you want to see me, you go do the traveling, you come here, I'll dance, I'll play music, but you travel, you do the traveling. And that was one of the bases for starting this new chapter in my life.
Is there anyone you could name who you have performed with that the audience would know? This would be the Ballet,
Maybe not so much performed with, but I performed with many, many famous people, but the person I think who had the most effect on me was I met the famous Russian male ballet dancer Rudolf Nureyev when he visited Dublin, that must have been in maybe the early 90s. And I was going into the dance centre in Dublin. We had a lovely dance centre there at the time. And I came face to face with him and I shook his hand. I put out my hand and shook his hand, but I made a big mistake. I said hello to him in Russian.
Mm-hmm.
That was a big mistake because he has spent his entire life running away from the KGB.
Oh.
He defected from Russia in 1962, and ever since then they've been trying to get their hands on him.
Mm-hmm.
And subsequently, when I said hello, my name is and welcome to Dublin in Russian, he kind of pulled back, like, or what do you want? Who are you? It backfired.
You probably scared the living daylights out of him, like.
It backfired. It
Yeah.
was exactly not the response I was expecting, and but that was it. But Rudolf Nureyev. So if you wish afterwards to shake my hand, you will have shaken the hand of the person who shook the hand of Rudolf Nureyev.
Nice.
That was very cool.
Last question about the ballet now.
Okay.
Do you think ballet had a significant cultural impact on Ireland as a country?
Oh, very much so. Very much so, because one of the briefs of Irish Ballet Company was to tour as regularly as possible. So we brought ballet to parts of Ireland that would never get to see anything like that. Mm-hmm. We went to rural communities and presented classical ballet. And looking back at it now, I'm amazed at how much places we managed to visit. So that would have a huge impact, and it would have inspired many people to dance, mm-hmm. like as in my own case, seeing something live. I always suggest that with children, that they see classical ballet, that they see a rugby match, that they go to hurling, that they go to a fashion show, that they see it all and
mm-hmm.
see what works for them.
Yeah.
That is very true. I've got very few loves in life. All of them are from seeing something live.
Live, absolutely.
Mixed martial arts was a big one for me.
Yeah.
I saw it live, fell in love with it.
Yeah.
Many others. A video game what they call convention.
Yeah.
I went to one of them.
Amazing.
Brilliant.
I mean, and the number of people.
And then you meet like-minded people as well.
Yes.
Yeah, like a big thing in Cork and Galway now would be the anime societies. So it would be all kind of anime and all that stuff, which is an acquired taste that most people would consider it to be an acquired taste. But people who grew up with it, they feel that it's very special to them. So I go to them very often as well. But when you go there, it's not often you meet people that are into the same things as you and they know everything about it.
Yeah.
You can pick their brain, which is your favourite. I'll tell them my favourite then,
It's
know.
It's like being a member of a ballet company,
Yeah.
We can talk for about 3 hours about just your left foot.
Mm-hmm.
Because to a dancer your feet are very important, and where somebody else would be bored to death. Whereas it's about being with your own, finding your tribe is really what it's about.
Yeah.
Brilliant way of putting it.
Yeah, finding your tribe.
Moving away from the ballet now, you were a musician. Could you tell us what instruments you used to play?
Oh, I grew up playing traditional Irish music.
Mm-hmm.
So I played the tin whistle, the flute, the uilleann pipes and the mandolin, and a bit on the piano as well. So I started playing music. I started on the tin whistle in 1969. A young musician came to our school, the model school in Gaelscoil, teaching the tin whistle, and only 2 years later I won the senior All-Ireland competition.
And what was that like then, competing?
Oh, I hated competing. I would be physically sick competing, and as soon as I won the All-Ireland I never competed again.
Yeah.
Well, that's the highest competition you can aspire to take part in, and once I'd won that, I decided that's it, I don't need to prove anything else. I don't need other competitions to prove that I can play music. And shortly after that, then I started becoming a professional musician.
What was it like touring then as a professional musician as well?
Touring as a professional musician is a little bit boring.
Really?
Yeah, a little bit boring in as much that you're constantly with the same people, and every day is a repeat of the previous day. You're on a bus or some means of transport. You arrive at your accommodation, be it a hotel or a B&B, and then you end up getting ready to go on stage, and all stages look the same. From the stage, backstage is the same. It's all the same.
You mentioned as well that you did a tour and you travelled from coast to coast in America. Which would have been your favourite city to perform in?
San Francisco.
Yeah?
Yeah. When we arrived in San Francisco with 30 people on the bus, and the director of the show flew out from Dublin just to be with us for a few days, and he went up to the front of the bus and got the microphone to, I suppose, to alert us to the fact that San Francisco is a pretty dangerous city. You know, for people coming from Ireland, we may not be used to big cities, and that he warned us that if we were going out, that we had to go out in groups of 5, no fewer than 5, and to have, you know, an adult with us, because we were all quite young at the time. We were in our late teens, early 20s. And he also said that San Francisco was kind of the known for being the centre for homosexuals. And I'm like on the bus going, yeah, we know that. Like, tell me something I don't know. And to be very careful. So we arrived in San Francisco, booked into the lovely hotel. The minute I booked in, I ran out on my own. Oh, we had that evening free because it was a travel day. We'd done a lot of travelling. And occasionally we would have a night free. And I ran as fast as my legs would take me to get a taxi, and went to the very famous Castro district. That's the gay area of San Francisco on my own. Had he known, he would have sent me home straight away on the next flight for not being disciplined. And it was my first time in my life ever seeing men walking down the street holding hands, men at the street corner kissing without checking that nobody's looking. It was just so natural. It was my first time in my life seeing this natural unfolding of what a gay life is. And when I was, the following night we had the performance, and when I was leaving San Francisco, I was sitting on the bus looking out the window. I could see the Golden Gate Bridge in the distance, but the tears were flowing down my face, and I was asking myself, what am I doing living in Ireland? What am I doing? And what am I doing to myself? Why don't I just remain here? So it was very, I was almost traumatized by the experience in San Francisco.
That is...
Yeah, I was traumatized. I was shown a vision of something that I cannot have.
Kind of like a utopia in a way.
A little bit like when I was growing up, I would go to all the weddings of my other siblings, and it was a perfect display of something I would never have. You know?
This is a good segue, actually.
Yeah.
What was it like then, being a gay man during the equal marriage referendum?
Okay, during I was very busy because I became a part of the campaigning group here in Southwest Tipperary and North Cork. In fact, I was looking for a group, and I found out that there was a group meeting in Mitchellstown. So I went down and not expecting to know anybody, and the guy running or organising it, I knew, and it was great, and he gave me a great welcome. So I went out every night for about 3 hours, going knocking on doors, going from door to door, and asking them to vote yes in the equal marriage referendum. You see, up to that point, we were watching the debates on the television and on the radio. Because of fairness, all television programs and all radio interviews had to give equal time to both sides of the referendum. They couldn't appear to seem
biased,
prejudiced towards one. So, but in retrospect, I heard a lot of things said about who I am, things that should never have been said in public. It was really, really hard to take. And at the end of every programme, be it radio or television, I never knew where we were.
Yeah.
You know, were we gaining, were we losing ground? And that it was until I went canvassing door to door that I got the feeling how we were doing. And I remember being in a place called, I think it was Ballet. And I knocked on the door, and a set of triplets opened the door, and they had just turned 18 and they were going to vote for the first time. And I asked them, would they vote yes? And while I was talking to them, the next thing, the mother appears. What's going on here? What's this about? And the three of them looked at me and they said, don't mind her, we're working on her. And I thought that was the most beautiful thing I had heard. Yeah. And it gave me courage. I felt for the first time, gosh, we might be with a chance. But it was only going door to door that I got that feeling. The radio programs, because of the laws of broadcasting, had to give equal.
I think that's very.
But I do remember there was a woman against equal marriage.
Oh yes,
Maria Steen, and she was on a radio program, and she very smugly said that, well, I don't know about same-sex couples, but when my child cries at 3 o'clock in the morning, it's not my husband who gets up. I get up and look after the child. But Colm O'Gorman was sitting in the audience, and he was leading an organisation in favour of the equal marriage, and he spoke up immediately and he said, well, with my same-sex partner myself, it's me who gets up because I'm slightly better at doing those things. He said, so at 3 o'clock in the morning when our child cries, I'm the one who looks after her or him, whichever, you know. And he was like really quick to come in, and it really put her in her place.
Yeah.
She was being awfully smug.
Good as well, like, because that's an awful thing to say.
Yeah. So we heard a lot of things that we should, I'd be better off not hearing.
When you mentioned there, kind of canvassing for it and going to the door with the triplets, I think that interaction is actually very retrospective of what it's like growing up in modern Ireland now, especially in cities. Kind of rural areas like villages are still very kind of prejudiced because there's a lack of education there. Whereas now in all the big cities, much more people are very open about their sexuality and everything like.
People have access to social media now. And, I remember in the same referendum, I saw a group of women coming out of a church one evening, and I was in a village in North Cork, and I remember saying to myself, oh Roy, would you stop, choose your battles, but I couldn't resist walking across the road to talk to them. And I was so surprised because they said to me, their response was, I asked them how they were going to vote in the upcoming equal marriage referendum, and they all said they were going to vote yes, and I was going, how come? And they said, well, we won't be told how to vote by an unmarried male with no children. And I was going, okay, I didn't factor that in. And a lot of them were grandmothers who had grandchildren who were openly gay, and they would like to think that those grandchildren would have an equal opportunity growing up.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of that going on. There was a lot more to it than we initially thought.
How do you think that has shaped the way for future kind of generations of the LGBTQI in Ireland?
Oh, well, I mean, it's just a different world now. I met my very best friend this week, and she showed me photographs of her son who just got married to his male partner. And I was going, oh my God. And all they had to do was just decide to marry. They didn't have to ask permission. I asked 1,000 people for their permission to marry my same-sex partner before we married. I asked 1,000 people.
And how long?
Now they don't. Now they're just like heterosexuals. They just make a decision. We're going to get married. And boom, that's it.
You love who you love. Like,
How
it's
long
kind
were
of-
you with your?
Oh, we're 30 years together. Yeah, we're 30 years together. And the night I met him, I was away with my. There's a gay and lesbian hill walking group in Dublin, and has been there for many, many years. And I was a member of that group, and we were up in Carlingford in County Louth, hill walking in the Cooley Mountains. And Tom had come out for, I think it was his first time coming out that weekend. And that evening we were all sitting down to dinner. There was about 30 of us, and we're in a hostel, and there was 30 of us. And I was trying to set up a friend of mine who was with me. I was trying to set him up with Tom. I thought they would be absolutely perfect, and the whole thing backfired, and I ended up with Tom. And the rest is history. But I was actually trying to get my best friends and Tom together. They say you meet your partner when you're not looking for them.
Yeah.
And it's so true. It's so true.
Maybe.
And the other point I want to make is that my brother, who is heterosexual, he met his wife on top of the mountain hill walking, and that's why I said, oh, I'll give that a try, and it worked for me as well.
That's
hill walking.
nuts.
You know, but you only meet your partner when you stop looking.
Yeah.
I was 40 years old. I was almost 40. I was tired of the dating game. I was tired. Actually, when Tom came along, I thought, oh, here we go, another, Johnny come lately. And, I was really jaded by the whole thing. And I was really considering living life on my own and not wasting time looking for someone. I felt I'd wasted an awful lot of time on deadbeats. And I should be doing something more constructive with my time and that. And I had stopped looking, and then I met Tom. So that's how it works.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how it works.
I think that's an awful scary way of thinking as well, that like even the notion of giving up on love.
Yeah.
Do you know? Cause
Oh yeah, but I did because I had been disappointed so often.
just burnt very bad.
Yeah,
Like.
I had been badly traumatized, and I felt, if you put that energy into yourself, you'd be a wonderful person.
Yeah.
You didn't just waste that on wasters. Now, the other bit of advice I have is we are the sum of all our parts, and that includes our disappointment in relationships. You must not deny it.
Yeah.
It has to. It's part of you. So don't deny it. It's a little bit like when I stopped dancing. People used to continue to introduce me as, this is Roy, he's a dancer, and I used to go, well, former dancer or ex-dancer, and that. And then I got to the stage where I never talked about dance at all. I would meet people and I would talk about dance, and I thought, hang on a minute, that's a bit mad, because you are the sum of all your parts.
Yeah.
And if part of what you did was that, well then just be upfront about it. And that. So I'm much more open about everything today than I would have been growing up.
On the topic of gay rights and things of that nature in Ireland, we spoke a lot about the triumphs of the gay rights movement, but there has been an awful lot of challenges as well. Would you mind going a bit more in depth on some of those?
I suppose one of the greatest challenges the gay rights movement in Ireland has had was in the early 80s, somewhere around 83, 84, we started hearing stories coming from New York primarily, that something was happening to gay men in New York, that they were developing an illness that seemed not to be curable. And of course I put the heart across us here. I panicked. I remember I panicked. I stopped having sex. I stopped straight away. And then here in Ireland, we started to hear advice from the government, which looking back might have been overkill, but it was very serious and very dark. It was a dark time. And then of course AIDS reached us here in Ireland, and I noticed certain young men on the gay scene not being there anymore, and on inquiry finding out, oh, he had AIDS. And I'd say maybe 50% of the gay men I knew had disappeared. And it was like as if a bomb had been dropped, a nuclear bomb. It was catastrophic what happened. But very little support from the government. They were up for telling us about it, but the actual putting finance in place to deal with it, of course, was just so slow. And today I can still see the faces of young men that I hung out with and was friendly with and are no longer with us. And that lasted for the bones of maybe 6-7 years, from the early 80s right up into the 90s, you know, until eventually I worked it out that it wasn't about not having sex, it was about having safe sex. But we had been used to unsafe sex for years before that. This was a whole new proposition. And in a sense, I feel a certain sympathy towards young men who have come out more recently, because they have to take that on board. Whereas I was part of the 24-hour, 7-day-a-week party back in the day. And we'll never go back to that.
Yeah.
I now look at a guy, well, before I got married, but I would look at a guy and I'd say, are you worth dying for? And I go, absolutely not.
That's an awful heavy pickup line.
Oh yeah, isn't it just, are you worth dying for? No, absolutely not. You know, it was a tragedy.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, I think the gay community are still traumatised, and I think it has yet to be written about. They're beginning to write about it now. In fact, I've been writing my own memoir for the past couple of years, and that's the one chapter that I'm struggling with. I don't know how to put words to what happened. I've written 3 lines, and I'm overwhelmed by it. You know, I'd almost prefer not to write about it, but I feel I need to write it, but I must write about it. I owe it to write about it. But I do feel what they describe as survivor guilt. Why did I survive? And I was doing exactly the same thing that everybody else was doing. Why me? Why me? I can't work it out. You know, guys I was dating at that time died. And I didn't. Did I have some antibody? You know, what was it? I don't know. but you feel guilt. And when I see men my own age that I know from that era, we look at one another with an understanding. We survived. You know, maybe we shouldn't be here, but we survived. Yeah. There's an unspoken understanding between us that we came through this. Yeah.
I'm so sorry, I'm lost for words now. I'm speechless.
A cruel thing, you know. But of course, in those days also you had families disowning their gay sons.
Yeah.
That was very prevalent.
I think
in
if
Ireland at the time. Shame
is still a big thing in Ireland, really.
Well, I mean, we had another episode, what year was it, again in the 80s, when the television designer Charles Self was murdered. He seems to have picked up some guy, brought him home, and the guy killed him. But 1982, because I was abroad, I was in America, thank God. Because what happened was the Garda Síochána started a new campaign where they went to every gay man's home and place of work to interview them.
That's disgusting.
And in doing so, outed them to their families who may not have known, to their employers who may not have known. Oh, it was shocking what went on.
What a horrible thing to do.
Shocking. Now, it wouldn't have affected me so much because I was out, you know, I was a ballet dancer.
Yeah.
But I happened to be on one of my American tours at the time. And it was when I came home. Well, I knew about it, but when I came home I found out to the extent of it. Because I would have been interviewed because I knew Charles Self, because I was involved in the first ballet ever in Ireland to be televised. And Charles Self was the designer. So I met him several times on set.
Yeah.
You know. And so the Garda would have had a particular interest in talking to me about it, but they didn't. But that was another shocking
Yeah, because even if you actually
episode.
think about that for more than a minute, like let's say now even a bisexual man and he's minding his business at work, no one knows he's bisexual because it was so heavily stigmatized back then, and a guard walks in and tells everyone. That's a joke, like.
Really, yes. So that was incredibly insensitive of the guards, but they were known for their sensitivity at that time. But we're talking about a time when it wasn't talked about.
Yeah.
You know, that. So we've had our challenges. Yeah.
On the topic of the AIDS thing as well, before we move away from it, even just watching you talk about it there, it's obviously incredibly difficult for you to talk about. However, I do think if you do write a chapter about it in your memoir, it would be incredibly beneficial to, honestly, anyone who reads it, just so you can document that part of history from your perspective.
I'm not sure if young gay men need to know, but I think it's not a bad thing to know. But I love the fact that young gay men now don't even know anything. They're just happy being themselves. It's like I was one of the founders of the Association of Professional Dancers in Ireland. We started that up in the 80s, and that then became Dance Ireland. We approached the Arts Council. In 1988, all monies were withdrawn from classical ballet. So we were employed one day, the next day we were all unemployed. So we formed this group, approached the Arts Council, and but the Association of Professional Dancers in Ireland developed into what is now known as Dance Ireland. And up in Dublin now, they received monies a couple of years ago, and they've built this state-of-the-art dance house with studios that companies now, dancers can now rent and you know, rehearse in beautiful conditions. And what I love is, if I ever go in there, the young dancers look at me as if to go, what are you doing here? You know, the day service is down around the corner for the elderly. They haven't a clue that because of me, they're in a fabulous studio rehearsing. So likewise with young gay men, I have the same feeling don't really need to know what we went through to make their lives as they are now.
But it's more
But knowledge
remembering,
is everything.
Yeah.
remembering the people who aren't here anymore. That
Yeah,
would be the
oh,
most
yeah,
important
yeah,
part
yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, it's always important to record history because
Mhm.
history that is forgotten is destined to be repeated.
Yes.
I forget who said that, but it's a good quote.
Yeah.
I just think it's incredibly important, you know, because you
the
have.
great writer Maya Angelou says that history liberates us.
Mhm.
Knowing your history liberates us.
Yeah. And
So it
I don't know, I kind of don't have much more to say about it because it's not my place to say it anyway. But I just think it would be incredibly beneficial if you did. However,
But I like
extremely
the fact that
difficult for you.
Young men are happy being young men and doing what they're, and the fact that they can get married is just,
Yeah.
but just like that, you know, it is wonderful. You know, it's wonderful.
Do you ever feel like a sense of pride in that? That
I do.
from
but
where you
I do
grew
feel
up?
like a dinosaur
Mhm.
at times, but I have a great sense of pride in what the steps we have taken.
Because, by God, like you some work done, like, do you know?
In my own case, it wasn't so much a question of getting out there and protesting. It was a question of being an example,
Yeah.
of just being myself and being authentic. You know, despite my poor mother at the time asking if I would just not go so far with being out, she was afraid of my job prospects.
Yeah.
Which is understandable, they're perfect for a mother to think along those lines. But I really didn't want to live a fake, false life.
Yeah.
I really always wanted to be authentic, irregardless of the cost. Irregardless, I wanted to be authentic.
It's very brave and admirable.
Well, my advice to young people is, you know, if you see something that you feel that's you and that's what you want to do, just go for it and don't let anyone stand in your way. No matter how well-meaning they are, don't let them stand in your way. You see it and you go for it. Go for it.
Yeah.
Whatever it is you choose.
People can have the best of intentions and tell
They
you
can,
not to
but
do
they're-
something
they're-
this,
yeah.
and
They're
they
not
could
you.
just crush your
They're not
dreams in
you.
the process. Like,
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
not you. You have to choose your path in life and stick to that.
I found the other topic we were supposed to talk about. It came to me while we
And?
were talking. It is your diabetes. Would you be comfortable talking about that?
Sure.
Okay.
Oh,
What's it like just
Well-
having type 1 diabetes?
first of all, for the past 10 years, first of all, I went to the doctor because I was feeling unwell. Couldn't stop falling asleep, no energy, and he asked me for a urine sample and he tested it, and without batting an eyelid, he said, "Oh, you've got diabetes." Had he told me I was pregnant, I would have been less surprised. I was like, "What? Diabetes?" He sent me across the hallway to the nurse, who spent the next 20 minutes instructing me on how to do this, that and the other. None of which I heard. Nothing. I heard the woman's mouth was moving and I heard nothing. You should not tell a patient, you know, the information until 2, 3, 4 days later when
Yeah.
they're over the shock. I was shocked. And so, for the past 10 years, I have lived knowing that I have type 2 diabetes. And the way to regulate that is excessive exercising and no sugar. So I was doing Keep Fit classes, I was doing yoga classes, dancing, going out social dancing, and I was eating no sugar to the extent that I completely stopped eating any form of fruit. Because fruit is incredibly high in sugar, and there was I thinking before this that you couldn't eat enough sugar, enough fruit. You know, you can get enough fruit into you, it's good for you. Not so. But I cut sugar out of everything. Oh, I started eating porridge in the morning with no sugar, and I would cry as I ate it.
Yeah.
I hated it.
That is extremely understandable.
Now I have porridge with no sugar. It took me about 2-3 months to get used to it, but by God, I used to force myself to eat porridge with no sugar. More recently, in fact last summer, I ended up in hospital down in Cork in the Bon Secure Hospital, and one of the consultants looked at my chart and he hummed and hawed about the fact that I was type 2. He said to me, I'm not convinced. He said, I'd like to do a few more tests on you, and subsequently got back to me and said, just as I thought, you have type 1 diabetes. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, what happened to the type 2 diabetes?
Mm-hmm.
He said, no, you've got type 1. And he said he was also very surprised at the amount of people in my age group now presenting for the first time with type 1 diabetes. Traditionally, people with type 1 diabetes would have been born with diabetes.
Yeah.
And that, whereas type 2 is more lifestyle, bad eating, maybe not moving so much. And
like people would consider type 1 to be more hereditary. And type 2 to be...
And type 1 is where the body does not produce insulin.
Yeah.
Whereas type 2, you produce insulin, just not sufficient insulin for the needs of the body. So you kind of supplement that. But, and then he introduced me to the concept of injecting myself 4 times a day with insulin, which was kind of a game changer, because as soon as I started doing that, everything sort of settled. And that it does run your life. You have to be very conscious of it. If you're going anywhere, you have to make sure you have your medicine with you and all of this. And I've spoken to 1 or 2 people with type 1 diabetes. I don't know too many people with type 1 diabetes. I think that's one of my problems. But I've spoken to them, but they've had diabetes all their lives. Whereas I'm new to it. I'm not even a year with type 1 diabetes. So I'm constantly monitoring my blood sugar levels, my glucose levels in my blood. So it's always present.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. It's always present. So the minute, and I'm forever eating cold, hot food, because when you get a meal, I go to eat it and I go, oh damn, I have to get the injection. So you get your insulin, and by the time you've injected yourself, the meal is no longer as hot as it was.
That sounds like the biggest pain in the arse known to man.
That's really the worst part of it for me, is the fact that I eat cold, hot food.
Do you know, good Sunday roast dinner or
that's
something?
What I mean. Oh yeah, I see. And the gravy then is almost congealed by the time you get to eat it. Because you've taken so long to make up the insulin and stab yourself with it. But it's not the end of the world, and people live with diabetes. They don't die from diabetes, they live with diabetes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We've taken an awful amount of your time now.
Listen.
So,
if you're going to do something, do it well. Don't do it by halves. We're here in Tigroy on the Culpurta in the Glen of Arlo in southwest Tipperary. I bought my home here when I was 21 because my poor mother thought because I was becoming a ballet dancer, that I would lose all my money, that I would spend all my money, and if I bought something with it, she wouldn't mind so much. So I bought the house with my money, which was a very smart move. I'm eternally grateful to my mother for her advice. And when I finished dancing at the age of 40, I didn't know what to do. I had nothing to do. I was finished. There's no demand for a 40-year-old man in white tights. You know, there might be in a whole other career, but not in ballet. There's no, they don't want you. And one of the reasons I gave up ballet was all the boys in the morning class were much younger than me, and they jumped higher than me. Their legs went higher than me. But worst of all, they would dance for less money than me.
Yeah.
And the writing was on the wall, get yourself out of here. But anyway, I got a piece of paper and a pen. And I said, what can you do? And I wrote down, I've got a home in the Glen of Aherlow. I speak Irish fluently. I dance, I play music. It looks like something vaguely cultural, Irish culture. So I started teaching Irish, teaching music, and I used to have small classes, maybe 6 children would come to me, and then in the evening maybe 8 adults might come, and I'd teach them a 10-week introductory course to playing music, things like that. And then one day I had the chairman of Limerick County Council was coming to me because he wanted to learn Irish or improve his Irish, and he said to me one day, he said, what do you need? And I said, oh, you're going to so regret asking me that question. I need space, I need more space. So he built a very large extension onto my house, and when he was finished building it, he wouldn't take a penny off me. And I said, how come? And he said, well, what you're doing for your community, this is how I can support you. And I just couldn't get over the generosity.
Fair play to him.
Like it was really, and also it was a great signal that I was doing the right thing.
Yeah.
You know, it was an indicator. So then I was able, because he built me a dance room, I was able to teach Irish music and dance. And then I thought, well, that'll only go so far with local people. They'll all come here, they'll do a course, and then they'll go, that's fine, and go. And I thought, do you know, if I had maybe half a dozen bedrooms, I could put on workshops.
Yeah.
So that's where the idea of building this particular building, which accommodates 16 people and a large studio, and then people started coming. I think every country in the world has been here, from Moldova to the US, everywhere, and it's amazing the amount of people that have passed through this building. And then for 10 years, with the help of the Arts Council, we ran a traditional Irish music summer school.
That's class.
Where people came and they studied with the finest musicians in Ireland. I mean, the finest. I had to pinch myself that they were here. And we put concerts on here. We built a stage and we put in 70 seats, and we promoted acoustic concerts, no microphones. Like if I hear the harp, I want to hear the harp. I don't want a technician deciding at what level I should hear the harp at. I've nothing personal against sound technicians, but I just didn't need that. But then it became too big an event. We eventually had to move down to the local community hall, which also had fabulous acoustics.
Yeah.
Because I chose the floor for them when they were rebuilding it. And so great acoustics. So we were able to continue with our acoustic concerts with much bigger audiences. And we did that for 10 years. So that was a huge undertaking. But one of my ideas behind opening Tig Roy was to stop touring. I was so burnt out from touring. My idea was like, I'll play, I'll dance, but you have to do the travelling and travel to me. And that was the idea. But we've been here for nearly 30 years, servicing the community, and then it moved into other things like the wellness, yoga, meditation, all sorts of different techniques. And then I started. When I first started, I didn't know how to boil water. So what I did for 4 years was I phoned up one of the best restaurants in Tiptown, and I would say to them, send me out 30 starters, 30 main course and 30 desserts, thank you. And one day, a very good friend of mine...
But that would be very expensive.
No, it wasn't as expensive as people thought.
Okay.
I was still able to cut a profit. It wasn't that as expensive. But one day, the local yoga teacher, who's a very good friend of mine, she invited me over to her house for a cookery demonstration. She had a friend of hers from Australia who was a macrobiotic chef teaching a class. And I couldn't give her the excuse like, oh, I'm sorry, it's Tuesday night and I'm washing my hair, can't come.
Yeah.
But I ended up going, I listened to what the chef had to say and I went, that kind of makes sense. Came home, emptied the cupboard, threw everything into the rubbish bin and restocked the cupboards with really, really good ingredients. You can only make good food from good ingredients. Not only did I start cooking and notice that everybody loved what I was producing, towards the end I ended up teaching cookery classes myself. So, you know, a job can form you, can change you and teach you, and mine here certainly did. It taught me how to cook.
Handy.
Absolutely. The best skill that anyone can have is knowing how to cook. Every child in every school should learn. It should be as basic as mathematics. How to cook.
I agree with you 110%.
But I couldn't boil water when I started here, and now I teach people.
There's nothing better than actually making yourself a meal as well.
Yeah, one year I had a group of women in, and they were the ICA, the Irish Country Women's Association, and I thought, oh God, they're going to eat me up and spit me out because they probably know everything. And I remember it was coming up to Christmas, and all of a sudden I was talking about cranberry sauce, and I said, oh, by the way, how many of you make your own cranberry sauce? There was silence. And I went, no one. And I said,
gotcha.
I just happen to have in the fridge a bag of cranberries. I'm going to show you. You see, cranberry sauce in Turkey is new. It's an American tradition. We never ate turkeys and cranberry growing up. And these women also, who were a good age, you know, they were my age and older. And I was slightly embarrassed, like teaching that age group, because I said, grandmothers, should they know everything?
Yeah.
But not. So they would have grown up having goose or something else as the main dish for a Christmas dinner.
It was never turkey.
It was never turkey. It was certainly not cranberries. And that. So I was able to teach them, and that was lovely. That was a lovely moment for me to do that. So I went from not being able to cook to teaching how to cook.
Amazing.
And now I've retired from it, and now I'm looking forward to reinventing myself. Every so often in life you get an opportunity to reinvent yourself, and it's important. And men in particular have a terrible problem with identity and work. For most men, they are their work. I am a whatever you work at.
Untold Ireland.
Now, having had to retire at the age of 40 from the professional world of dance, I know what it's like to recreate a new identity. I went around for 3 years after finishing with dance, not knowing who I was or what I was or how to. I didn't know how to introduce myself to somebody because I had no identity, because my identity was connected directly to my work. So what I learned from that experience is whatever you work at next, don't connect your identity to it, your other things as well. So I have found the transition, although I find it strange that I'm never going to cook for a big group of people again, you know, in a commercial sense, and I'm not going to be looking after groups coming in. I'm transitioning very easily into retirement, very, very easily, because I've learned the lesson about connecting your identity to your work. Women tend to find it a little bit easier, and the reason I think behind that is they grow up, you know, they're the daughter of somebody, and then they're the wife of somebody. They're used to changing in their life as they age, whereas women's, not so much now, but maybe my generation even would have changed their name to their husband's name, and therefore changing their identity. And that whereas a man is the same from the day he's born, he has the same name to the day he dies. His name is never changed or altered. And that, so therefore I think, you know, when men work and when they specialise in something, they become over-attached to that.
Yeah.
And when they stop, they're lost.
Yeah, that's a
They're
big thing as
lost.
well, when like kind of older men, we'll say about 50 years of age, there's always been a big problem with kind of that generation and mental health, because most men, they don't really have that many friends that they talk
They're
to.
lost.
Do you know?
They're lost
And
when they stop working.
yeah, then they stop working. And I'd say it's also the reason there was that big surge of divorces during COVID. Because what it was is there was a lot of unhappy men in this country. They were trying to live their lives at work, and then they'd come home, you'd probably see them for an hour or something, and then they'd go to the pub or they'd go to whatever.
All the time.
And then during COVID, they were forced to stay at home with their family the whole time. And sure, you know.
Or it's women arriving at a certain age and going, do I have actually 2 children or 3 children in this family?
Yeah, that's
I
the main
have
thing as well.
3 children, and copying onto themselves and going, adios.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I think a lot of people, they stay with
What
the
they
wrong
know.
person for so long that they get attached to the instability of it all, I'd
Yes,
say.
yeah, negative.
Yeah, and then
Yes, yeah.
they get obsessed with it then, do you know? And then it becomes their entire life, it swallows everything. It's, that's my cranky husband, these are my 2 dickhead children, do you know, like, it's kind of that way of thinking, and then they get trapped inside there.
I think it would be safe to say that not a single day goes by that I feel blessed to be married to Tom. Not a day goes by.
Is there any particular reason? Or?
I still can't believe it, because I never expected to get married.
Yeah.
Growing up, wasn't it? You know, I was nearly 60. We got married, so, you know, I felt a little bit, not ashamed, but I felt a bit uncomfortable.
Ah, but he's very
Because
cute
of
as
the
well at
age
the
I
same
was.
time.
You know, I wasn't a young blushing bride, you know,
Yeah.
and that. But I sometimes have to go, you're actually married. You're there. So it's incredible.
You made it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a feeling of that as well.
Yeah.
The strength it gives me. Advice to young people.
Yeah.
I think I've given you that. I think.
Is there any aspect of Ireland from when you were younger that you would like to preserve for the younger generation?
Oh, I think maybe the one thing, and it mightn't be just me, I'd say all people my age, is the business of connectedness.
Yeah.
I think social media has its place, and nobody loves TikTok and Insta more than me. But I think it's at a price.
Yeah.
And I find that younger people today are not as connected.
And because it's so easy to get access to someone, like, you know, just ring them or text them or anything like that, you miss face-to-face interaction.
Yes.
Yeah, like
And also the misrepresentation of our lives in social media.
yeah, it's,
You know,
and
I
then
look
people
at my-
compare
I look at
yourself to
my-
that, like,
Insta, my Facebook or whatever, and I go, God, he has a great life, but none of the heartbreak or none of the
yeah.
none of the struggles are on Facebook.
And it affects people then as well, because you're comparing your
you're
behind the
putting out that
scenes to a
message.
highlight
I'm
reel.
fine, so you should be fine too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very well. So connectedness is something I would miss from when I was younger.
And would there be any final words of wisdom you would give to the younger generation coming up?
Talk to everyone.
Yeah?
You learn from everyone. And even people who are not as good as you, say what you're doing, say you're doing particular work and they're not as good as you or they're not as advanced, talk to them. You learn something from everyone. I will talk to everyone and I will expect to pick up something from everyone.
Tom, you were looking like you had something to say there before we finish up.
I was just going to ask if you have any words to say Oscalia.
Oh, yeah, I'm quite a rock on Oscalia. I've an awful lot to say in Irish.
If you just, maybe there was one saying that has stuck with you over the years, you've heard someone say it.
I'll just say what the Irish language means to me. Is it gone?
Yep.
Mad leis an Gaeilge is dóil an rud is tábhachtaí ó maithéid san ná ní éiting marachtant gan Gaeilge bheith mar chuid de maithéal. Ní liscom céim fá ach nuair a bhí mit lear béarla lá in iad lé bhíon craicáilsa. Bhí me craicáil suas ag lear béarla agus bíon rud óin agus an rud a bhíon óin ná an Gaeilge agus sé na Gaeilge agus bheith I ggóúidir Gaeilgeoirí eile. So tá sé fíor tábhachtach amsa.
Gormacht.
What's up?
Do
you understand? Can I just say about Russia? I've been to Russia 3 times.
Oh yeah, or go ahead.
I went out on stage on my very first night to play music in it's called Centralny Dom Hudожники, the Central House of Artists.
Yeah.
In the center of Moscow. And I went out and I introduced myself as Gaeilge. It's Mr. Roy Galvin, from a Saucepan shop. Sorry, Moscow. This is my first night here in Moscow. I also said the same thing in Russian and I got a standing ovation because it was my first time ever in Russia and I could speak Russian. They were absolutely amazed.
Yeah.
After the concert, about 20 students from the university came up to me in my dressing room speaking fluent, flawless Irish.
Really?
With a slight Russian accent, which was very attractive. And I said to them, I said, why, Ken Fa, why are you learning Irish? Expecting, here when you talk about speaking Irish, it's a lot of baggage.
Yeah.
It's a lot of baggage. I was like, oh, please don't talk to me about your problems at school.
Yeah.
They said, we love the sound of the language. The sound of the language. My God, isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
But then when I think about it, I love the sound of the Russian language.
Yeah.
When you meet individual Russians, you couldn't meet nicer people. They would give you the shirt off their back. And if you think we are hospitable as a nation, you just go to Russia. The system under which they live under is horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. I don't know how they do it. But as individuals, they're the most beautiful people you will meet. But don't confuse that with the system.
Yeah.
And what we're hearing about today is the system. The top echelon of the system, which is rancid. But on a one-to-one, couldn't meet nicer people.
Roy, I'd like to say thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. But a lot of people have a mistaken view of Russians.
Yeah.
They think they're, Russians spend their life being in fear of being listened to or overheard. They're hardly able to say what they mean in their own homes.
It's
frightening. It's
yeah.
We do not understand the concept. We can say, I can say anything about Micheál Martin. I can say he's a wanker.
He is a wanker.
No, I can say that.
Yeah.
But there's nobody going to knock at the door.
Yeah.
What was it, the great musician, I think of his name. He said he used to go to bed every night with a packed suitcase. Because he said that people who were dragged away in the middle of the night with a suitcase somehow returned home. Those without never did. The KGB.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Like, doesn't it sound the weirdest thing ever?
It sounds dystopian.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just sounds wrong.
He always had a packed bag every night. One of the great pianists, one of the great composers. I'm just at the block at the moment, but yeah. I read his autobiography, The Noise of Time. It's a great autobiography.
The Noise of Time.
Write that down.
Perfect.
If you heard his music, you know it straight away. I'll be all day now. I won't sleep tonight.
We'll check that out as soon as we get back to the car.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
I'd say we're finished up so because the camera's about to die.
Fair enough. Well, listen, I hope you have what you need.
Yeah, of course.
And as you can see, I'm always open to doing these things in the hopes that, I think it's good to record people's stories.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. And don't forget your own stories in that as well.
Like, one of the reasons we actually started this initially in the first place was the idea and the concept of preserving Irish social history.
Yeah.
That stories that people lose
because... Are you
because...
doing that for a project?
We're just doing it we just want to do it, like.
Nobody suggested it to you to do. No, it's not a college project. No.
It's
your own.
No one's told us.
It's your own baby.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we've kind of noticed while we're doing that it's... At the start we kind of started it for a laugh and because we thought it'd be fun, and it's kind of turning into something else.
Something much bigger.
Yeah.
Oh, we do that in life all the time. We start something, we go... And then the next thing is it becomes something...
Part of that as well is that we feel a big pressure now to actually, are we up to the task? Are we up to the challenge?
Sure, self-doubt is a part of any...
I know a lot of people, especially in our whole town, they come up to us and they're like, we love it. It's so important.
Okay.
And it is very pressure building, but as my girlfriend would say, pressure's only for bouncy castles, tires and bras.
Pressure makes diamonds.
And my advice to you is, do not do your best. Do what you can. Never do your best. It's a waste of time. Do what you can.
Okay.
I was here one day and I had a German woman, 86 years old. She flew into Dublin, hired a car and drove down to teach a course here. And she was looking at me, flying around the place like a blue horse fly, trying to feed everybody. It's full on when it's one groups are in. And she said, Roy, stop doing your best. So do what you can. Do your best for your family or your spouse or something. But do what you can. She changed my life because I was doing my best up till then. All the time I was killing myself. I was absolutely killing myself. I would be absolutely destroyed after a group would be here. I'd have to collapse into bed. I'd be so destroyed from doing my best. Not towards the end, after she had that conversation with me, I gave it a go. And so I pass that advice on to you. Don't do your best. Do what you can. And if people aren't happy with that, tough. As they say in Russia, tufsky shitsky.
Tough shit.
Yeah, tufsky shitsky.
I didn't know.
If you don't.
Thank you very much again.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all very much for watching if you made it to the end of the video. Obviously, this one was much longer, borderline 2 hours. But, if you stuck through the entire thing, thank you very much for watching. We hope you enjoyed it. As always, our social medias are linked below in the description. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, bloody... at this point, we'd probably set up a bloody LinkedIn. Next week, guys, we have another special episode coming out, and then we're back to our kind of usual programming of people we find in the village and stuff like that. Kind of the more light-hearted videos, because it kind of feels like the start of the season anyway has been very serious for a start. So I'd say episode 4 will be around where we go a bit more casual, get back into it. People from the village, people from town. But I'm rambling on now anyway. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time.